the truth is, there is a huge issue within the Japanese learning community. Okay, maybe more than just one, but in all seriousness, there are a number of issues within the Japanese learning community that I haven't seen or heard about in other language communities, or at least they're not as severe in those communities. I'm sure every community has to deal with these issues to some extent. Now, I'm sure that you all have your own opinions on what these main issues are, but I'd specifically like to talk about two issues that I think are at the forefront: framing and elitism. And before we go any further, I just want to say I'm definitely not a perfect person, and I'm sure that I'm guilty of some of this stuff sometimes. I'm definitely not trying to put myself on a pedestal here. I just genuinely think that these things are issues in the community. The first main issue is framing. This is specifically talking about how certain people or content creators frame themselves or other people. Take, for example, how the channel What I've Learned frames Matt vs. Japan in this video. White guy speaks perfect Japanese from watching anime. Here's how he did it. Now, that's an amazing title, isn't it? And if true, that's a crazy thing for anyone to do. Unfortunately, this title and thus the framing of this video is essentially a lie. It's insinuating that Matt vs. Japan kind of just watched anime and that's how he got really good at Japanese. Now, you can just shrug it off and say, well, it's obviously clickbait, in the same way that videos from creators like Xiaoma are oftentimes using clickbait. And I think that minor clickbait can be a useful tool sometimes, but I'd argue that right there is a part of the issue, or at least a symptom of it. We just kind of allow the clickbait, or feel like we have to utilize clickbait to create weird framing or narratives or distort the truth around learning languages in general. Now, we can blame YouTube for creating an environment that promotes clickbait, or we can be introspective and realize that it's us who are utilizing and promoting the clickbait. Matt himself even goes into more detail in the actual video saying how he studied, and I think it's pretty obvious that anime was not his only or even his main method of study. He talks about making flashcards, watching other content, reading novels and such, so it's pretty clear that he didn't just learn from watching anime. And again, the one suggesting such a thing in this video isn't Matt. Honestly, I think the whole "I learned Japanese just from watching anime" narrative is a little weird. I've met a number of people in VR chat over the 7 years that I've been playing it who have claimed that they've learned Japanese only from watching anime, but when you pressure them just a little bit, suddenly the truth starts to come out. Oh, hey, so how did you study Japanese? I've never actually studied. I just learned it from watching anime. Wait, really? So the only thing you watched was anime? You didn't do anything else? You didn't watch movies? You didn't watch any YouTube videos about learning Japanese or anything? Well, I watched some videos that taught some basic stuff and I listened to Japanese podcasts. Oh, okay. Wait, what about this game? Surely you've learned some stuff by talking to Japanese people here in VR chat, right? I mean, we're all in the ENJP language exchange world right now. Well, yes, of course. My friends help me and teach me Japanese all the time. Oh, okay. So what you're saying is that you didn't actually just learn it all from just anime, right? The interaction always ends up with them admitting that there are a number of other ways that they have learned or are currently learning Japanese, and that's perfectly okay. Just be open and honest about your Japanese learning journey. There's no reason to hide the ways or resources you've used to learn the language or to feel shame about how long it has taken you. The only reasons people hide this kind of stuff or frame themselves in a certain way is because they want or need to feel superior to others, or because they feel like other people will ridicule them. And this right here touches a bit on the elitism in the community, which I will talk about later. Interestingly enough, as I was making this video, I came across another creator who is utilizing some weird framing techniques. Here is the gist of their video. It takes people 2 years to learn this much kanji, but I did it in only 1 month. Now, you hear this and you think, that's a little sketchy, but I guess it's plausible. That's when you need to take that grain of salt. He said that he wanted to speedrun learning how to read kanji and that, as of 2 months ago, he didn't know how to read anything. And here's where the problem is. He also mentioned how he's been going to school in Japan, where he went to Japanese middle school and is currently in high school for 3 years total. I'm sorry, but there is just no way that you can pass Japanese middle school without being able to read anything, and there's no way that you haven't learned a bunch of kanji in that amount of time. Stop lying for YouTube views. The second issue I want to talk about is elitism, or at least I think I'm going to call it elitism. I actually wanted to talk about a third issue, gatekeeping, as well, but I think that topic might fit in this category. This is in reference to people who put way too much emphasis on their Japanese ability, their Japanese knowledge, or their way of learning, and use this as a way to place themselves above others and or put others down. And I'll say it right here, my Japanese is not perfect, as I'm sure you guys already know. I have a bunch of things I still need to work on. Heck, on my previous videos, I've had some people point out my pitch accent on some of my words. I realized that I still have a lot of room to grow, and that's why I even pinned one of the person's comments, because I want people to learn from my mistakes and be able to learn correct Japanese. It's not about me trying to flex on people or trying to build a brand that suggests I'm a genius or really good at Japanese or something, and I'm definitely not going to go out of my way to crap on somebody else's Japanese ability. I do think there's one caveat to this, and that's if someone is teaching Japanese on YouTube or something and their Japanese isn't correct, I think it should be pointed out. And sure, if the epitome of the Dunning-Kruger effect shows up, is super rude, starts talking smack, and is tossing around a bunch of incorrect stuff, I think it's fine to shut that down in a constructive way. But let's try not to overwrite other people's language journeys or their experiences with our own. Just because you think that your method is the best, or just because you are good at the language, doesn't mean that what the other person is doing is inherently wrong or bad. As I've mentioned in previous videos, people learn better in different ways, mainly in a way that they enjoy, and at different speeds. Just because a certain way was the fastest for you, doesn't mean that it's good for everyone else. I think it's perfectly okay to suggest different ways of learning to people, and it's okay to give your opinion on why a certain way of learning might be good or bad, but you have to do it in a constructive way that isn't attacking the other person. I'll touch on this point more towards the end of the video. I think there's a special kind of elitism in the form of gatekeeping that exists in the community as well, specifically in the form of perfectionism. You aren't allowed to talk about blank because you're not perfect at Japanese, or you're wrong about blank because you're not good enough at blank. I actually kind of had those kind of comments on my first video, comments crapping on my Japanese and saying it was garbage and that I basically had no right to talk about anything. Now, as for why elitism happens, I think there are two main reasons. The first is, I think it can sometimes be hard to separate your own skills from your own self-worth. If you've put an extensive amount of time into learning a skill, that means you've put effort, physically, mentally, and emotionally, into it. It means that it has become a part of your life in some ways. Because of this reason, sometimes people make that skill a part of their personality, or it becomes like a personality trait. And the second reason is, in the case of content creators, they need to be seen as this amazing expert on the topic, or they feel that people won't ever listen to them. So, where does that leave us? And what can we do? My thoughts on the matter are, 1. We, both as individuals and as a community, need to stop framing stuff related to Japanese learning in weird and unrealistic ways. Let's just be open and honest about how much time we've spent learning Japanese, in what ways we've acquired the language, and even admit our mistakes and accept criticisms. Honestly, this isn't just for the sake of other people in the community, but it's beneficial to ourselves as well. You need perspective and humility to grow as a person. 2. Let's not shove learning styles or information down other people's throats. Why the hell are you doing X? You should be doing Y. Let's try and refrain from doing stuff like that. It's incredibly unhelpful and just makes the Japanese learning community look like it's filled with a bunch of toxic and elitist pricks. Not to mention, it'll just make people not like you. It's perfectly okay and potentially even helpful to suggest things to other people though. Hey, have you ever heard of blank? It was really helpful for me. maybe you can try it out and see. Honestly, I think too many people get stuck in the trap of, well, science says this is the best way, so if someone doesn't do it this way, they're doing it wrong and/or they're stupid. Let's not forget that science is oftentimes lacking in nuance. For example, let's hypothetically say that science says that podcasts are the absolute best way to learn Japanese. If a person hates listening to podcasts, then podcasts aren't going to be good for them because they're going to get bored, annoyed, or lose focus easily. But science said that podcasts are the best, so you're doing it wrong. This kind of rhetoric doesn't help anyone. It makes the other person feel bad and might make them less likely to learn the language, and it will just make you look like a prick. For example, in a previous video, I showed that science proves that you learn better when you enjoy the thing that you are learning, but if someone has the ability to just purely grind a language and get results in spite of not enjoying it, I'm not going to tell them that they're stupid. I might suggest something like, hey, have you been able to find any ways of studying that you enjoy? That might help you retain the information even better and you might get even more progress. There's a number of reasons why the Japanese learning community is memed on as being super toxic and elitist, and I'd personally like to change that. Learning Japanese can be very fun and incredibly fulfilling, but the Japanese learning community has created some very tall hurdles and obstacles that people have to try and navigate. Let's just try our best to be open and honest about our progress and mistakes, as well as refrain from shoving information and such down other people's throats. You 100% can kindly suggest things and offer constructive criticisms, if they're welcomed, but let's make sure we're not creating roadblocks for other learners. Hey, we are at the end of the video, which means thank you. I'm super thankful and super grateful that you're all here watching my videos. I put a lot of time and thought into them, so it's really awesome that you're here. The things talked about in this video are very near and dear to my heart, so I wanted to express my thoughts about them. By all means, let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and let's do our best to make the Japanese learning community better.